Hello, everyone. Oh, hello, everyone again. First of all, I would like to thank Tania Bruguera and Instar for being here in this Documenta. Yes, to speak louder? Okay, I will. I was trying to behave and control my Cuban accent. So let me try to do my best. So I would like to thank Tania Bruguera and Instar for being here in this Documenta. This Documenta, which is a challenge for the left's thought to the future. I would like also to thank the Museum of Contemporary Art of Monterrey, which has supported my presence in this event. I would like to thank again to all of you for this opportunity of dialogue with you, certainly to you all for being here today. I will introduce myself first. I'm Taiyana Pimentel, originally born and grew up in Havana, Cuba, but I developed a career as a curator and art director of museums in Mexico. First in Mexico City, then in Monterrey in the north, close to the border. We are going to speak today about art history, about representation, and about action in art. We will think in this classic idea of being in a revelation, in always being thinking on how we can change the world. So let's begin. First, it occurred through representation. Later, it was interacting inside and outside the institution. In recent times, artistic practices have become immersed in the interstices of activism. The truth is that contemporary art gained a transgressive position before society, culture, and the institution. In the other words, as Andrea Emelife points out, the sense of protest against the status quo is inherent to art. One of the first referential political positions for Latin culture is that of the shooting of May 3. Do you remember this fantastic painting of Francisco Goya? Yes, right? Okay. So, painted by Francisco Goya in 1814. A painting where he portrays the massacres perpetrated by the Napoleonic occupation. It is known that this well-known work of Goya inspired other political positions toward the end of the 19th century. And this is considered one of the first revolutionary representations in art for breaking away from the codes of Christian representations in Western paintings, but also for Goya's exaltation of the act of protest, a testimonial painting that could in turn be considered an antecedent of war photography. Goya began a tradition of change, of critical positioning in the face of history, which towards the middle of 20th century became an artistic canon. However, this emergence of art in the public sphere has a long process, and we could assert that its first hasty dialogue occurred before the institution that embraced it. That said, the interventions of Christo and Jean-Claude evolved from those small graphic art drawings and objects to make a deeply political and environmental statement, achieving the recognized grabbed Reichstag. Hans Haacke removed the foundation of the Museum of Modern Art in New York when he questioned the silence of Rockefeller in the face of the war of the United States in Vietnam, generating one of the pioneer movements, the institutional critique, that gave us the right to destabilize the discourse of power. But Haacke introduced art to a problem that not only positioned artistic creations against institutional hegemony, but opened a field of possible encounters between both actors, which is mean the negotiation. Let's say that institution, artist, and the figure of the curator as an intermediary open then on the loopholes of the negotiations. Somehow, Haacke has told us how to empower ourselves in front of the institution. But paradoxically, he showed the institution the way to establish bridges, leading it to gather even the most radical positions. There are naivetes in the constructions and artistic discourses after Haacke, but neither do they exist on behalf of the institution. Censorship, therefore, is an act that makes us responsible for both spheres of the artistic practice. In this same sense, Marta Minujín, the Argentinian artist, carried out her 1974 happening at the MoMA in New York during a tribute to Picasso when he passed away. She appeared to kidnap a small group of attendees to the institution who had previously agreed to participate, to offer them a series of experiences different from those that the museum took place during the concert performance that she did within the institution. In other previous works, Minu Code, 1968, originally commissioned by the Center of Inter-American Relations, today America's Society in New York, explores social codes in groups of leading figures in the arts, business, fashion, and politics in New York. through a series of cocktails parties and happenings, generating a strong criticisms of positioning of social classes regarding the art world. You can see this piece which I'm talking about, Minukin piece, at the new curatorial statement of MoMA permanent collection. Other steps were taken by women and men artists in that second half of the century, of the 20th century, in relation to transgression as a lawful right of the creator. In this striving and militant recovery of feminism, thought and construction of art, we know that artists such as Carol Schneemann, Anna Mendieta, and Martha Rosler use their own bodies to position gender confrontations as artistic political acts in themselves. Gestures that today highlight the official construction of the history of art. The same thing happened with the activist movement against the homophobic policies of the United States government during the peak years of the battle against AIDS. Felix Gonzalez Torres, the well-known Cuban-American post-conceptual artist, was part of the material group who adhered to its collaborationist and activist strategies, which can be appreciated in an important part of his work. The Western historical reading that associates Felix with the minimal and conceptualist movements generally ignore the political act that existed behind each of its agglomeration or the piles of candy, poster, or any other objects. In addition to his active participation in the political movement of the moment, Felix's work contains a political demand, the kind of revision that González Torres brings forth entail that we take a moral and political stance in the face of the conservative public policies of the American government of the 80s. Other transgressive positions were those built by the group of artists from the south of the Latin American continent during the military dictatorships that took place between the mid-60s and the 80s of the 20th century. Eugenio Dittborn, the Chilean artist, found in email art the strategy to face the communication restrictions imposed by the Pinochet dictatorship. His airmail paintings allowed a highly critical world of the regime to appeal to the most institutional squares of the West. Elio Itichica, for example, used dance as a visual and political strategy, making the body a device of performative experiences in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, in which he summoned the public to generate bodily movements with his parangoles. Parangoles is a kind of dress that people use to dance. So Oitichica guide their public through wearing these parangoles. It's the kind of dress. And in other Oitichica strategies, He moved again towards the public space through his, I will say in Spanish, because in Portuguese it's penetrables, pero yo no sé Portugués. So, penetrables, who submit he achieved in the well-known Cosmococas, the series of penetrables executed with Nabil de Almeida. Is an important filmmaker from the subculture in Brazil that today are in the collection of the public park of Inhotim in Brazil, in which both artist and cinematographer sublimated the art-life duet by generating a series of drawings traces with cocaine, one of the most extreme and honest gestures that until today are known in art. For his part, Cildo Mireles, another Brazilian fantastic artist, carried out between 1970 and 1976 his well-known countercultural project Intersections into Ideological Circuits that define a strong political stance against the dictatorship in Brazil. Well known are his interventions in the symbolic bottle of Coca-Cola, in the bank checks, and in the cruzeiros, the official currency of Brazil. Each of them containers of political messages that symbolically destabilize the information system of the military government. These provocative ideological systems generated by Mireles in the middle of the last century are today part of the art history, definitely institutionalized. They have been taken out by the young Cuban artist Hamlet Labastida, called, and therefore aware of the background of Mireles, to propose a new ideological insertion now in the Cuban peso. Currency abuse by the different moments of economical correction of the impoverished island, Labastida's artistic proposal, which of course correspond to a strategy of demand for social change, was the excuse used by the Cuban of the Republic of Cuba to bring the creator of these and numerous other works that are located socially and ideologically in relationship to totalitarianism, to political prison. The rest of the story we know, and the artist is in this Documenta. Hamlet, thank you for being here, it's my honor. Bring to creator of these and numerous other works that are located socially and ideologically in relation to totalitarianism, to political prison, sorry. The rest of the history we know, and the other artist is in Documenta to enunciate his practice. However, few know that Labastida has been expelled from Cuba. He has become an expatriate who cannot return to the country because he could suffer imprisonment. It must be understood that an expatriate for Cuba is not the worker who, as a result of globalization, migrates in search of better working conditions. In Cuba, the expat is an individual who is prohibited from receiving the special permission granted by the government of the Cuban Republic so that Cubans can live outside and return, either to visit, to work, or to live inside. In Cuba, we have no rights. Cuban citizens to demand, neither as creator nor as civil society. We have returned to the darkest epochs of the dictatorships that have permeated the political system since the 20th century. The march or the riots that took place in September 2021 of a civil society that proposed adequate food and economical and political change, and they emerged naturally and randomly in many cities and towns of Cuba, triggered that thousands of Cubans today suffer common prison. Among the prisoners with sentences of more than 5 years in prison are minors and artists who have been positioned their critical speeches within the artistic parameters. As a way to protest against the guidelines of a government that betrays any revolutionary principle, even artistic, cultural, economic, or social. Putting the voice out there in the public space is a crime that leads to prison in Cuba, either to advocate for gender rights, primary survival needs, or to demand a conversation with an authority. In other words, the negotiating strategy we learned from hacking, a strategy that even the Cuban Cultural Institution itself has assumed, has disappeared. Today, it is replaced by confinement, and the lack of the creative rights. For this reason, the artists Luis Manuel Otero Alcántara and Michael Osorbo, among others, are in prison awaiting sentences of between 7 and 10 years. Like any other modern society, Cuba has been a field of cultural and ideological confrontations. In terms of the institution, art was a terrain that was still conceived as one of negotiations, where each party yielded and or stretched the rope in order to find critical space to occupy. Hence, since the 80s of the 20th century, Cuba has generated a continuous artistic movement focused on a critique of socialism. Let's say that the negotiation between cultural politicians, artists and cultural agents, and the individuals at the highest level of government themselves has never been a wasteland, but one in which projects such as the Castillo de la Fuerza, Castle of Force, and Arte Calle, street art in the 80s, or La Cátedra de Conducta in the 90s, is the conduct, Tania, how do you call that in English? Cátedra de conducta. Behavior art in the 90s. The 00 biennial of Havana in the last 15 years. Nor can we sublimate. They are moments of freedom where a lot was demanded from all parties involved in order to activate artists and intellectuals. Cuban cultural and artistic agents are generally migrants. A post-Islamic or Icelandic discourse has been built that resort to criticisms as the only possibility of existence, at the risk of being aestheticized. Today, we live a change. Some creators, artists, musicians, playwrights, etc., have decided to stay and maintain their struggle for change from inside the island. This new confrontation revealed the government's dark side. If you don't go into exile, they will banish you. A colonial term to expel opponents to the oppressive government, but at that time, in the 19th century, they couldn't return to the island without the permission of the Spaniard Captain General. Today, if you don't accept the banishment, they send you to the common prison between 10 and 20 years. Thank you so much.
Hello. Do you expect to go back to Cuba to visit your family?
No, in 2 years. No, in 2 years. So we will say later what happened. But, you know, which is important is not me. I decided to come to here, speak about Cuba for the first time in my entire career, because a group of artists and cultural agents has encouraged me to do it. And because of Tania, Hamlet, and all this group in here, and position the art history in Cuba, is just not probably the best person for being speaking on the name of my colleagues, but I could do it. And I have the chance to do it. I think it was a responsibility to me. So, you know, you can see in here all the discourse Instar has organized for us. And this is just a part of what they have been doing in the last years. And you can see also the independent program that Sandra Ceballos, another Cuban artist, and Ezequiel developed for a long time. And thanks to all these independent projects, and thanks to all these holes that we found as a professionals, is that we can have this critical position in Cuban art scene.
Hello, Taiyana, and
Hi.
we have to hug later, but anyway. I want to make you a concrete question because this is one of the things that I'm examining in my mind all the time. And maybe without doing so much story, because it's complicated, the situation of art scene in Cuba since the last, I don't know, since the first Havana Biennial, since what happened with the Volumen Uno, because you were telling somehow the story of Latin American art involved in this question of criticism, of institutional critique. So my question is the following: did you think that this neglected area, because to tell
That what?
this neglected story of art involved with activism in Cuba, art in the resistance, art in collective, did you think that what is happening in the last 2 or 3 years with the Movimiento de San Isidro, with 27N, with Instar itself, with how art was involved in the really involved, in 100% in public denunciation and claiming for their rights, and now the inclusion of such a project in the Documenta 15. Do you think that this is basically something that cannot go backward? Because sometimes the Cuban government said that there is not. So my question is, do you think that this is basically a moment when we can start to focus more in this kind of art? Because the Cuban government always is insisting that this is not the thing. Even art market think that is not necessary, think that this art is like a... So to the audience understand, there are many ways to understand Cuban art, and sometimes there are positions that are not so close to accept this identity of institutional critique, political critique, cultural critique. So as in other ways, even art market can understand, or even art fairs, or even biennials can understand that is the Russian art, the artists that were, like from Voina and all those groups. So I think my question is: do you think that now we're going to see they're going to understand that is another narrative in the Cuban art, especially more involved with that? It's complicated, the question, but because I seen that my situation is that I seen that now they're approximated to those dark holes, those dark areas. Of course, that this is bringing many people that there were many years down in that dark areas, like Espacio Aglutinador and Sandra Ceballos. So it's the first time that in a huge event with the concept of Instar is taking that in the international arena. It's very relevant, but it's, at the same time, for many people, it's absolutely new. For us, it's well known, but my question is that there is a change in the narrative to how to see the Cuban art. This is my question. It's complicated. I think it have to be started to talk about the future about that.
I think that you could probably answer yourself better than me. But I will behave and try to make an argument about this. So, let me see. There is many differences, of course, in the history I made about Cuban art, from the 80s to the art which is happening right now. I think that when I was your age, the 80s and 90s, we have an art scene. But I think that what is happening now is that you have a social, a civil society looking for changes. And art has become a parallel situation to this social society. I mean, if you are looking from outside, as it is my position nowadays, I can see a civil society fighting for their rights. But as an art historian, I know that there are many artistical positions fighting for having a critical discourse in this new era. Definitely it's different. You have encouraged to do this inside Cuba. You know, and when I was young, we tried to do it. It was critical, but we went on exile immediately next day. But don't behave naively. The art market will consume the entire movement from the beginning to today. And this is good. I have nothing against the market. I think that even the market construct collections, history, they make books, they preserve archives, as we have heard in the last time with important Cuban archives. So with this new, which to me is totally different, is the position of the government. Is the government putting people in jail? I remember, or I've heard many stories from the 60s that many artists were not on jail, but on concentration camps for homosexuals. But you know, supposedly they were regenerating themselves for being the new men. But today they are sharing the common jail. They have this stigma only for the government because all the civil society is behaving with our colleagues. So, which is very weird, is to find the Cuban government putting minor people. Do you understand that part that I explained? They are minor. They are probably 16 or 17 on jail as any person. That's never happened before for political causes. They usually took their parents to jail, but keep the kids in their houses. But this is something that is talking about es el miedo. It's the fear they feel. So we are in a battlefield, basically. I don't know what will happen with your colleagues, you know, and probably we will need to expect for some important politicians to go to Cuba and negotiate their scarcelation. But I don't think that it will be easy at this moment. So where are you from? You all, this young public I can see in here. You are from Frankfurt? Wow. Wow, so you are perfectly a Spanish speaker. Good, very good. Okay. Are you all students? No? Artists? Yes? Well, Tania, so again, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to be talking to you on Monday in Kassel. Tomorrow I'm flying back to Mexico. If any time in Monterrey, please just lock the door at Marco Museum. Thank you.